To save everything, click here. You may have heard of this brilliant book by author and researcher Evgeny Murazov. In this book, he identifies and describes the contemporary phenomenon of something called technological solutionism, which permeates the tech world and increasingly influences political decisions at every level. But what is this? Tech solutionism is the tendency to see the internet and technology in general as the answer to the most complex problems of our time. In the past couple of years, the rhetoric around the digital revolution claimed that education is broken and technology will fix it. Now, the problem with this approach is that it tends to identify simple answers in all domains, not just the edtech sector, before the problems have been fully articulated. Why are we talking about this? Because online learning is going to massively expand the amount of opportunities that you'll have in your educational path, but it's not going to be a quick fix solution to the struggles naturally connected to the learning process. The only way to outgrow the challenges of online learning will be to confront them and then work your way around them. Hopefully this course will support you in doing so, offering you the space to reflect on your difficulties and tools to deal with them. So let's now go back to the question of our unit. How can you best support your students to learn and participate online? As we learned in Unit 1, in our knowledge-based society we need to develop a new understanding of what it means to learn. It is not as important to know certain information. It's about orienting yourself in this fact ocean, this enormously overwhelming amount of information, and to develop reflection, critical thinking, and analysis skills. We could say that ultimately the goal of education is this: to teach learners how to learn. Thinking about where we should start from, it's kind of evident that we have a very good case study right here in front of our noses. You. Developing the empathy to understand what kind of barriers your students are facing is crucial to supporting your students and designing your pedagogical approach around them. So, why don't we start off by reflecting on our own learning experience right here in this course? Pause the video and write down 5 difficulties that you're facing so far in this learning experience or have had in your online learning history. Did you pause the video? Or are you still here? We're watching you. Done? Awesome. Meanwhile, we also took the time to reflect and came up with a list of possible strategies that you and your students may find useful while studying online.
We call it the 4 Ps method. Be prepared, be perceptive, be proactive, and be personalized. While going through these strategies, we're going to switch between the student and the instructor perspectives to equip you well for both roles. The first one is be prepared. Now that we have reflected on our own barriers and difficulties with learning online, you may have a better sense of what your students have to face within the class when you're an instructor. So our main question for this lesson is, how can you best organize your online teaching as an instructor to best support your students? One way is by structuring and preparing your lessons based on the following questions. What are my students' learning goals? That's the first one. Number 2. What content is necessary for them to learn to reach those goals? Number 3, which methods will actively support my students in understanding that content? Number 4, how much time will I need to implement those methods? And number 5, and most important one, how can I meet my learners where they currently are? For this we mean, what kind of information do your students already have access to or already possess? What do they already know that's relevant to what you'll be teaching? And are they more receptive to an interactive seminar format, or is it better to start with guiding them in more of a frontal way? What is their preferred learning style? Answering those questions while preparing each lesson will give you a solid structure for your teaching. Yet you'll find yourself rethinking those elements as you gain knowledge on your students and the content they seem to need. Remember, it's easier to be flexible when you start from a structured plan. In the previous unit, we talked about the risk of a lack of motivation from the students when studying online. Online learning is less institutionalized and more focused on flexibility and freedom to explore all sorts of content without constraints. Also, with asynchronous or self-paced learning, you'll get to work on the content at your own pace, slowing down when you need more time and skipping what you already know. This is great, but you and your students can easily underestimate the burden of freedom in such a setting. On one hand, you gain a lot of enthusiasm for being able to manage yourself freely and follow your interests and passion in your learning path. On the other hand, it can be difficult to retain that intrinsic motivation that you need to stay disciplined and keep up with your learning goals. And we do underestimate the impact of an extrinsic motivation to help us structure our work and reach our goals. It's easier when a teacher is telling you what to do and you're meeting regularly in a classroom. So that's where you as an instructor could start to address this problem. Going through these stages will help you replace the structure that's been lost a little bit online without losing the freedom your students gain in that online setting. We therefore suggest you dedicate at least one session with your students to do the following. Talk about the purpose of the course. That's number one and the most important. Number two is setting a learning goal together with your students so they can always keep that in mind. Number three, work on a timeline and try to build in frequent feedback sessions throughout that timeline. And number four, set shorter in-between goals so you can reward your students' efforts every time they reach a milestone. Remember that formative versus summative assessment we talked about in the last unit.